Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Indo Politics from the Irish Independent. I'm Fionnán Sheahan. Well, the Dáil wasn't sitting this week as ministers were globetrotting ahead of St. Patrick's Day, but there was still plenty going on, from the current oil crisis to the long tail of the tribunals. To take a look back at the week that was, I'm joined by my colleague Cónal Thomas. Cónal, there's a few of them still in the country, but the bulk of ministers are out and about around the world. Darragh O'Brien standing underneath the Christ the Redeemer statue, admiring it being lit up in green light. It might cost them a few bob though to light that up in green if they're going to be doing that for longer than a few hours. In the absence of government and the Dáil and so on this week, energy was still centre stage though. Yeah. And the line from the government is, we're not going to be found wanting.
Well, I don't know what that...
What does that mean?
No, I know.
Well, no, that's the end of our show now for today, because Connolly can't answer that question. What are they saying here?
Okay, so we had a week, 2 weeks nearly now.
2 weeks, yeah.
No knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
That's what we were hearing. As the price gouging allegedly was going on, as prices at the pump were going on, home heating oil was going up, etc., etc. Separate to that, there was the discussion around, all right, whatever about immediately reacting to the price gouging, and we know that Peter Burke has asked the CCPC to undertake what was a review. 2 days later, suddenly it was an urgent investigation, so there's been, a bit of action man going on there. Separate to that, you've had this debate re-emerge around whether they're going to do anything around energy credits. Now, what it means that they're not found wanting, I have no idea, because on the one hand, they're saying they're not going to have any knee-jerk reactions, and only today you had Taoiseach Finance Minister Simon Harris, who's in Paris, talked to France 24, saying that Europe needs to work on its energy security, right? Now,
yeah, that's a separate issue now.
Yeah.
See, this goes back the well-trotted out arguments from 4 years ago about energy security, supply, and you have to develop more renewable energy in order to not be dependent upon the Russians 4 years
ago,
and not be dependent upon the Middle East now and global oil chains. That's great. What are they doing now though? Because you'd imagine options on the table are energy credits, give everybody the 200 quid.
Yeah.
Again.
Not till October though.
Yeah. Cut the excise duty on the on petrol and diesel, not introduce the carbon tax increase, and then the other one would be kind of the fuel allowance going down the social welfare route. So the official line is, we won't be found wanting, but what people want is relief.
On those four options though, say fuel allowance, they would point out, has just been extended to 50,000 working families. This is the line trotted out this week. That was a measure announced last budget. Right? Okay. Carbon tax.
It was announced last budget, which means they were factoring in for something, the prevailing winds of that time, not this current crisis.
Yeah, exactly. Carbon tax, they've completely ruled out not moving ahead with that.
Okay.
Now, we've seen the last few days that hauliers kind of wrote back. They said they're going to protest. So carbon tax is going to go ahead from May 1st. The increase, the energy credits, it's a budget matter, right? But the pressure on the government now, and I think this is the real pinch point this week, was when the energy minister, Europe's energy minister, effectively came out and said that you need to start looking at lowering your energy.
Yeah, Jorgensen, the European Commissioner,
Now, I think it's important in that he did particularly say, there's a bit of a nuance in there, he did say on electricity specifically. So that wouldn't include necessarily things like the carbon tax, right, or diesel or that kind of thing. It would be specifically around electricity. Where this is going to go, we've just seen in the last couple of hours, the Strait of Hormuz is going to be closed. Right? We've got Micheál Martin going to the White House next week. We'll talk about that in a minute. I don't think there's going to be any immediate reaction. They're all off, as you say, on their jollies. The government's not going to do anything now.
Dáil is back done next Wednesday. So day after Paddy's Day.
There'll be pressure again.
Micheál stands up presumably he'll be back. Out of himself, he'll be back, having been in the White House the previous day. So he'll stand up in the Dáil. Mary McDonald will say, people are being hard hit by the crisis in the Middle East. What are you going to do about it?
We don't know where the Middle East crisis is going to be by next Wednesday, Thursday, and I think that's what the government would point to.
Okay, so what they're hoping is, let's just hold off, see what's happening. Maybe this will all abate over the course of the week.
Well, one of the things that
die off and the Straits of Hormuz open up again and this passes.
Possibly, but one of the things I think that's going to benefit the government, but like the benchmark here, I suppose the reference point has always been Russia's invasion of Ukraine 2022, and the prices that were elevated to that point if they don't get to that point, the government say, oh, they're not as bad as they were in Ukraine. So there's not going to be a need to introduce the emergency excise measure they did, say, for instance, outside of the normal budgetary process like Pascal Donoghue did. So the point to that, and I don't know what they don't know where this is going to be in a week themselves. So yes, the pressure will still remain. I think the bigger, the more interesting question is not what's going to happen necessarily in the next 2-3 weeks. I think it's how long they can hold off in the months ahead on things, as you say, like energy credits. Because as soon as, let's say, dull recess hits in the summer, you know yourself, the budget starts in August.
Yeah.
Everyone starts getting their stuff in, preparing their pitches, preparing their bids. Ministers are talking about themselves. If there's any sort of indication of the government that they're going to move towards energy credits, people are going to hit on to, and they'll be tied to that. But they won't. Well, I mean, say they might. But as Jack Chambers and Pascal Donoghue would have said for a long, long time, we need to move away from these one-off measures because they're not economically sound. And if you do these one-off measures that cost the government €10 billion, the cost of living packages the last few years, expenditure is going to have to.
But we know as well that they are a weak government when it comes to coming under pressure. We only saw that recently with the SNA climb down.
Oh, I think they're...
As soon as something turns into a crisis, these guys will fold.
I'm not a betting man, but I would almost put money on it. There would be some relief in this budget on the energy space. I don't think this government can go on because they were getting hammered by this Fish.
So the stuff at the moment where people are buying their tanks of home heating oil and filling up at the petrol station, you're still saying they'll hold off another week or two to see before that alleviation.
And what they'll do is they will always point to this CCPC investigation. What they've done with that is they've bought themselves time. Now, government leaders have said we want this done by the end of April. Well,
I'd say the price gougers are quaking in their boots at the prospect of that now,
I did think
Peter Burke is coming down the track at you.
I did think it was interesting when you started off when we were talking about Darragh O'Brien, right? And I do have to wonder in all of this, right, where are the priorities? Because we had a Minister for Energy and Climate, right, in the middle of an energy crisis, promoting an air travel route from Ireland to Brazil, right? Yeah. And you do kind of think, well, hang on a second, lad, there's a crisis or a mini crisis going on at home, and this is going to roll on for months and months and months. And suddenly the Energy Minister is in Brazil, and the only, from what I can see, the press release he's put out since the invasion has been to call a meeting of the Energy Security Group in his own department.
So again, we're seeing, the importance of green solutions being put back on the table, focus on renewables, focus on retrofitting of houses, making things more energy efficient, get more people out onto public transport. So the green agenda is still there.
Oh yeah.
It's just there's not, in the absence of a Green Party, there's nobody pushing it.
That's what I'd say, but you think in the middle of all of this, it would actually benefit the government to come out and actually champion what Eamon Ryan would have done in government, what they are continuing to do. Now, they will say, and they have said publicly, that things like the carbon tax do go towards the likes, as you say, of retrofitting, investment in renewables. But are they pushing forward that message enough? And I think part of the reason they aren't is it's no different to a lot of the housing policy we've seen roll out in the first 18 months of this government. We're not going to see the benefits, if we're going to see them at all, for another 2, 3, 4 years.
Okay, so electoral cycles work on a different phase. Or as Micheál Martin pointed out recently in an interview with Mary Regan about all this, was that Eamon Ryan was great at setting these targets, but Micheál didn't have much faith in them being reached. So again, it's a circular argument that goes round and round. So we'd be better off with climate change if we just ditch the targets and get on with all the things and just say, well, if people feel better about it, then that's what. So in the middle of all this, global crisis as a result of what's happening in the Middle East, Iran basically showing that they're far more resilient to the attacks from the US and Israel. The Americans seem to be trying to find a way of getting out of it and declaring victory, even though the Iranians keep fighting back. Micheál Martin ends up in the White House, actually on St. Patrick's Day this year.
Yep.
He's going to be there on Tuesday.
On the Tuesday, on St. Patrick's.
So there'll be no Conor McGregor being brought in as the leader of Ireland on this occasion. Who knows? What's he going to be saying on this issue of the war in the Middle East? If anything.
If anything, that's the point. I mean...
Or is there a consumer-friendly thing for him to say, which is, it's having a global impact?
That's what he'll be pressured to say. Right? Because I think as well, domestically, Trump realises that. And I think partly with the reason, there's been no US rollback in terms of its military action. But it has changed its language in terms of, we've had Pete Hegseth and Trump come out in the last week and say, this is going to be short, but we'll decide when it's done, right? And Iran, as you say, is not going to stop fighting. this could be like the shortest Vietnam War ever. But anyway, that's beside the point. What Micheál Martin is likely to say is that, I think that's a good point. I also think there's a couple of things. One, government has been hammered over the fact that it won't brand this a breach of international law.
Yeah.
He'll be asked about that by the journalists in the room. Both of them will be challenged on that. I don't know how he's going to answer that in front of Trump. But I think he'll pivot cleverly in the way he is wont to do sometimes around the UN. And he said that the UN fundamentally needs reform, right? How you square that with Trump's Board of Peace, which is effectively another option to the UN in front of Donald Trump, I have no idea. This is really different. This is a lot more, it's probably a lot more high stakes for Micheál Martin this year, because last year, bear in mind, we're in the middle of a trade war and no one quite knew what Donald Trump was going to do. But at least Micheál Martin could go over there and say, well, we've got Ryanair, we've got all these great companies who are investing in the US. This is a two-way street, et cetera, and that seemed to work. It's a lot less clear now, and I think what's really interesting.
So he had that argument a year ago to say trade is a two-way thing. He can't go over there this time and say warmongering is a two-way thing.
No, he can't. So I think he'll try and stick to the trade script. But what I think one of the things that might be tricky for Micheál Martin, well, there's two things. One, the last head of state, he's meeting Keir Starmer now this evening or tomorrow for the UK-Ireland Summit in Cork, right? But before that was Pedro Sanchez of Spain. Now, he's high up on Trump's enemy list at the moment after Spain didn't allow him to use the bases on the way to Milan, right? Similarly, I'm hearing in government that there's going to be a pretty high-level trip to Canada soon, which could be his next big trip after the States. If a journalist pinpoints him on that and says, you were just in Madrid with Pedro Sanchez, who you don't like Mr. Trump, and he's diversifying our trade and moving away from America by going to China and Canada, and there was talk of a trip to India this year, how's Trump going to react to that?
See you at the Irish Open in September, presumably with the answer. So is Trump going to, like we saw a year ago, he a couple of barbed comments about Ireland's the trade deficit the United States
taking money fast. Yeah.
That's fine. Is there any other reason why Trump is going to want to pick a fight with us, of all people?
Not evidently.
On St. Patrick's Day.
No, I don't think so. And I can't see that. And will this fall flat? It might. Will this be a flat affair? I mean, it could be. The problem with Trump is when he does these things is it's not like the Oval Office used to be, which was 5-10 minutes and then you're all ushered down. Trump
it can go on for an hour.
And I was there last year and it went on for 45 minutes solid.
Were you surprised? Okay, so you went in there, you're going to the White House press briefing room, which everybody is used to seeing on the telly.
Yeah.
You're then brought out to the
Rose Garden.
portico on the edge of the Rose Garden beside the residence. And then you're herded in really fast. You expect really there for just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, what I found.
Was there any warning? Did the White House officials say, hey, listen, lads, we're going to be here for half an hour?
No, and that's what I was expecting. And a lot of us, I think, were expecting us to be sitting in that briefing room, which is actually much smaller than you see with Caroline Levitt on television. It's actually much smaller thing. We thought we'd be waiting there because we thought there'd be this bilateral thing for 20 minutes, half an hour. Didn't happen. I mean, there was
as Micheál was brought in, you were brought in.
Nearly about maybe I'd say 2-3 minutes.
Okay,
there was a delay.
Yeah,
you're shuffled in as you're barreled through into the Oval Office. Not actually that big room when you've the world media and all the Irish media over there. And then suddenly, this Trump sits there and takes your questions for 45 minutes.
He starts talking.
He does a little bit of a spiel, well, it's great to be here with Micheál or whatever he says, and Micheál kind of sits there nervous and not knowing what's to come. That's how it's going to go this year. But the topics are different. Obviously, there's a lot more high stakes, I would argue, than this. Now, I think domestically there was a lot more high stakes last year, given the trade issue, the damage that could have done. But how?
So Micheál has to come up with a formula of language that allows him to be critical but not condemnatory of the United States foreign policy to the President of the United States, who is doing this, while also being on the defensive on any trade issues and also not anticipating what else wackily might come up.
Exactly, and bear in mind that the US trade deal is effectively stalled at the moment. So that's another big issue that kind of isn't really being talked about, I think, in all of this. I think Micheál Martin will probably pivot to the golf because we know we have the Ryder Cup of next year. I wouldn't be surprised if he hands him an official invitation. Do you remember when Trump and Keir Starmer had their first meeting and Keir Starmer did a big play of the invitation from the King for a second state visit? Micheál Martin could well do something about that for the Ryder Cup. Donald Trump may confirm he's going to come to the Open, which his son has already said and told Sunday Independent he's going to do in September.
Nuremberg. Yeah.
And so those would be the kind of easier points for Micheál Martin. I think all this is going to be dependent on what the media just throw at them.
Yeah. And then rely upon the fact that it is St. Patrick's Day and there's a bit of a feel-good factor about St. Patrick's Day. It's not a day a week earlier as it was last year. So it's the day itself. So it's a bit of top of the morning to you. Yeah.
There's a bit of something. Well, also two things I would just say as well. One, it's on a Tuesday and back here it's a bank holiday. So how much of the public here will be watching it? Kids, people off their kids, the parade.
Yeah, yeah.
There's probably an element of that, which I don't know whether that will help Micheál Martin or not. The other thing I actually just to touch on, I think, is I do wonder if these Patrick's Day trips and the Paddy's Day visit to the Oval Office is not now a bit tired, given where the world is at.
Yeah.
Speaking to someone in government earlier, and they were saying they think the diplomatic outreach and efforts just need a bit of an overhaul now. It's beginning to look a bit rusty. I think Enda Kenny kind of defined what it might look like during his tenure. We're a long way down the road now, and everything's changed so much in terms of where our big brothers are in the world, who we're relying on. You just wonder, is this...
Yeah, if St. Patrick's Day is our big diplomatic day around the world, does it make sense to be sending the Taoiseach to the one place every year when you're not getting a whole lot of change out of it? Yeah. Well, let's see. The President's comments, is that still lingering there? Did that put me all under just that bit more pressure to say something about the war and the international rule of law and so on?
I think to a certain extent it does, because if a journalist says, well, our president said, et cetera, and if Trump latches onto that, that could be a bit of a hairy moment, because often Americans don't differentiate between what a president is there and a president is here. But anyway, Catherine Connolly would have said there on, was it Sunday, that she hit out at the violations of international law. She was quite clear in her language. I think a lot was made of this, maybe too much, Sunday into Monday, by some outlets, and Steve, I think it's a bit of crack in one sense, because there's always been this talk, and I don't want to hear the phrase again, Catherine Connolly's finding her voice, because she had no shortage of it when she was in the Dáil.
Yeah.
And I don't know why we're only seeing it now, but that's fair enough. I guess everyone has to settle into it.
Was there a good volley back from government, though, to say, listen, foreign policy is our job?
It was a volley back. I don't think it was. It's been described as a rebuke. I don't think it was a rebuke. It was a diplomatic reminder. Yeah. I mean, no one from the Taoiseach's office or otherwise is going to come out and say, "Hey, you now, if she did it repeatedly,
if that goes,
But that's the thing to watch. I was only talking to someone there recently, and she made strong enough comments about disability and carers about a week ago, right?
Yeah.
And UCD. Kind of her first strong comments on a social issue, platform. Right? A social platform. This is kind of her second in a week.
Yeah. How often does it
happen?
I suppose it is different because Michael Higgins went in and ultimately he was a candidate for a government party when he became president first. It was, and he, to be fair to me, did say he would speak up. I suppose we didn't quite know what that meant. For his second term, he made it quite clear what the people expect. I mean, I've always spoken up. I'm going to continue to do so. So that was fine. So, he was probably given a lot of latitude. In Catherine Connolly's case, she's made it clear as well, I'm going to speak up. So from a government perspective, they could be looking at her going, listen, you were in the opposition, now you're continuing to be the opposition, so why should we pay much attention to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair argument, but I mean, at the same time, I suppose 64% of the public voted for, and those people will...
You're on the head of state and you have to respect them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think people who voted for her will want her to be speaking up in that way. I mean, I think we've spoken about this, we made the points before Christmas or around the time of the presidential election, that Michael D's talking points, and that 14 years of Michael D came to define this campaign in many ways, not aspects of it which we're not going to get into, but the talking points and the general tenor of it, what the topics were. I'm not surprised she's come out and said this. I don't think it creates much of a headache for the government before Patrick's Day, but I was only looking on her website earlier, and you just see, and this is something as well I think is interesting. She signed only 7 bills in her time, and there are a lot of them really quite unremarkable, nothing particularly landmark. She might herself maybe sitting in the Irish going, what are these lads doing?
Yeah.
Do you remember when Michael D wouldn't stop complaining about how many bills he had to sign?
Yeah.
But still no council estate.
Yes, that's also an interesting one. Let's see who's appointed to that in time. What did you think this week would be the government's, and by government I mean that's Micheál Martin, Simon Harris are sitting there looking at it going, Michael Lowry is not going to be charged arising out of the Moriarty Tribunal. sigh of relief, one less headache.
Yeah.
That's done and dusted now, grand.
Yeah. Can you imagine as well? So yeah, no DPP decided not to charge. Bear in mind, it was Michael Lowry himself pointed out in his statement that it was 14 years since the start of the Moriarty Tribunal till it made its findings in 2011, and then another however many years before this decision not to. So this is going on a long, long time. So Michael Lowry is seen as the kingmaker, right, of this government. Relief, definitely. Imagine okay.
So if the opposite
Had the opposite happened,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, let's say the opposite had happened.
play that out.
I think if the opposite happened, and the Dáil was off and everyone was off on their jollies, the opposition, in particular Sinn Féin, would have gone berserk, demanded a recalled. All sorts of pressure would have piled up and potentially have burst. If Dáil was sitting, it would have even been more pronounced.
Yeah.
The fact that this has happened while they're away is the best possible outcome, I think, for Micheál Martin and Simon Harris.
If the opposite had happened, it probably wouldn't have been tenable that Michael Lowry's support could continue to have been courted and accepted by government. You wouldn't have had a trial next week. No. It probably would have been next year. It probably would have been 2 years away or something like that.
No.
So in the meantime, government would have been in this position where they were saying, well, he hasn't been convicted of anything, and so on. So it just removes all that kind of headache about the uncertainty over Michael Lowry.
Yeah, and I think what we were saying is that this could now be the end of it. Now, I'm saying that I still think there's possibility that Sinn Féin will make some sort of brouhaha when the Dáil is back. It may be a way of a sideswipe or a comment or otherwise, because they won't let this go, and they haven't let it go. I think what just the situation or the possibility of whether the opposite happening. What that would have meant then as well for the regional independence in government more broadly. Because, as we know, Micheál Martin hates the term and always rejects it, but Michael Lowry was the kingmaker of the government.
And he's still the stabilising force in there as well.
It's a stabilising force. Now, he doesn't sit at cabinet. How much he's informed by, the only member of that group, Sean Canny, who sits at cabinet. It's unclear. There's a lot of...
We're hearing that they're not very well informed.
I've heard that they're not very well.
In a shock development, a minister who sits at the cabinet table respects cabinet confidentiality, is what we're hearing.
Well, exactly. I've been hearing this for a while, that Sean Canny, he sits at all the cabinet meetings. He goes to the leaders' meetings on the Monday evening. He's on a lot of the cabinet subcommittees. But it's my understanding that that's not getting passed.
And he keeps that to himself, which is what he's supposed to do.
Even though there may be a suspicion that somewhere behind the scenes, perhaps others and Michael Lowry are getting all the information, that doesn't seem to
be the case. So they themselves then are reliant upon briefings from the government, being the actual ministers.
I remember, I don't know if you remember when the day the government was formed. Now, this was the day the speaking row broke out, and Micheál Martin's election Taoiseach had preferred. But Michael Lowry came out in the plinth, and with Boxer Moore and with Noel Grealish, Sean Canny, and he read out their names and their promotions, and it was almost like a teacher handing out the award. And then he's gone off into the background now. So this gets rid of a headache for the government.
Looking at what you were writing about this week on Jim O'Callaghan and his big immigration plan, you can briefly outline what that is, but the wider question I'm interested in is this Jim O'Callaghan's big play for the leadership of Fianna Fáil, because he's, as you've been setting out, he really is stamping his authority on this proposal.
Yeah, I think every leader of Fianna Fáil, or any leader of any political party, particularly one in government, would want to have one big issue that they'll have seen to have had success on, drawn an outline from. Yes, there's an element, and I think what's interesting about this plan, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but the timing of this is really interesting, because this new plan is going to come into effect in summer, and at the same time as that, the EU-wide Migration Asylum Act will come into effect, which Ireland signed up to. The International Protection Bill and overhaul of Ireland's asylum policy will also come into effect. Big Jim, or Jim's big piece of legislation, and we'll take over the Council of the European Presidency in July. And Ireland will want to be seen to be putting on the blue and yellow jersey here and getting on with migration, safer borders, faster processing times. And if at the end of that process, bear in mind as well, we're still not clear what happens at the end of the EU presidency. Because bear in remember Sean O'Farrell and others said it's the time for renewal in the Fianna Fáil party. And we'll have had our centenary.
Yeah.
That's obviously been taken as a not so subtle dig. That's
So
trying
the
to bring
rebels
along.
have returned their swords to their scabbards for the year because the 100th anniversary of Fianna Fáil and the EU presidency. You expect that comes out again in December then once
Quite possibly.
business is dealt with now, Micheál, thanks.
And if Jim O'Callaghan has this big policy play, which he's doing, so this document that we reported on is a 20-page document, some of which was authored by Jim O'Callaghan, I'd say, and it effectively sets out a strategy, or the start of a strategy, the draft of which will go to Cabinet next week, or next month, I should say, and will be finalised by the summer. The language in it is quite striking because it says that the immigration and migration system into Ireland has to be to the benefit of the people of Ireland. And it has to be respectful of the rule of law and social cohesion. Now, to many people, that would seem like a bit of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But this is a political philosophy.
Yeah.
This is a political philosophy that Jim O'Callaghan espoused long before he was Justice Minister, bear in mind. I remember getting briefed on the Fianna Fáil Justice manifesto, part of their general election manifesto, and this is straight out of it. So he's not changed his thinking.
Yeah.
And it could be argued this is the first time we have a Justice Minister and Integration Minister in a number of years who has a clear political philosophy on what the immigration system is.
You'll also recall that after the presidential election and the government was looking to move on with the agenda, Simon Harris came out on day one and started hitting the immigration issue.
That's right.
This is Jim O'Callaghan now pulling it back.
That's true.
Saying, no, this is mine. So what's the plan?
Well, the plan is, the document itself doesn't talk in terms of policy, but what this document I think will do, and I think
so it's setting out a strategy over the course of the next decade that on be it on numbers or how you approach it or how you're going to handle immigration.
You know that international protection numbers need to come down. We know, and it says this explicitly in the plan, that the €2 billion spent on IP accommodation and the outsourcing of private providers is not sustainable. It's setting off a sort of a jumping point for more, because bear in mind as well, the state would have just bought City West.
Yeah.
Where's it going to move next?
So it's kind of, this plan is kind of saying, listen, we've been bobbing along now without really knowing what we're doing. So this is what we intend to do for the next decade.
Exactly, and it will be.
So it's been proactive rather than reactive to the numbers that are coming through the gates of Dublin Airport.
Exactly, and one of the things you'll always hear the government say is, we haven't waited to take measures. I think that's worked more successfully for some ministers than others. Because for James Brown, the housing minister, we've yet to see the success of those policy measures and that three-way gamble he's taken on increasing the supply. I actually think Jim O'Callaghan's policies have already paid off in terms of reducing the numbers. And bear in mind, you would have seen yourself, Fionnán, in the Sunday Independent polls, how high immigration used to be in terms of those issues.
Yeah, it drops off.
It's dropped and it's dropped and it's dropped.
It can flare up again when an incident arises. But for now, it is becalmed in terms of an issue that is lighting up the public mood.
I think for a lot of people for now, see Jim O'Callaghan as having a handle on this. Now, I should say this strategy as well is not just we need to sort out immigration numbers, it's too high or anything like that. It absolutely says we will continue to need healthcare workers from abroad. If we need to get 300,000 homes, which we want, we will need construction members from abroad. But there needs to be a social cohesion and a balance in all of this.
A busy week all around, despite Darragh O'Brien being up on the Council of Rio de Janeiro. Right, so my thanks to you for watching and listening. Next week we'll be coming to you a little bit earlier than usual when we'll take a look at how Micheál Martin's visit to the Oval Office went. Mary Regan, our political editor, will be out in Washington covering that trip. So keep an eye out for that episode. It'll be dropping sometime on Tuesday evening, depending upon how things pan out in Washington, because that day can sometimes stray a bit off schedule, so we're not giving you an exact time on that. As always, you can find all the latest episodes of Indo Politics on the Irish Independent's YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to Connell, and we'll see you next week.